Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Dani Nierenberg. I'm so excited to be here to moderate this panel on urban food policies to help tackle the climate emergency. And as I've said throughout the event, it is an emergency. We are really in a crisis. But before we start, I'd like to give a lot of thanks to Stefania Amato of C40, their food systems senior manager, for organizing such a thoughtful group of people to bring together to discuss a wide range of issues. And I know we have a small group right now. I hope you're all properly caffeinated. I'm sure people will trickle in as they finish breakfast. So let me dive right in. There's no secret that the global food system is responsible for roughly 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. And in order to tackle the climate crisis, we must urgently transform the way we produce and consume food across the globe. And we don't have time to waste, and I've said this before, I keep repeating myself, we don't have time to waste. It's important that we connect the dots between this event and COP26, as well as other discussions that focus on food and agriculture, health and nutrition, biodiversity, and other topics. These issues, as you'll hear from Brent Locken in a little bit, are inextricably linked. And we need to make sure that they are not isolated in their own silos. We need to break those silos down and again, do it quickly. So during this session, international experts and city officials will present their perspectives and experiences on how addressing the food climate nexus through the delivery of the Good Food Cities Declaration. And so this session will focus on three main themes of the declaration. One is food procurement, the other is healthy foods and healthy diets in the food environment, and then the other is food waste. For each session, we will have a keynote introduction, which will be followed by deep dives into each of the topics. And then again, every topic will be represented by a city official who will illustrate concrete examples of how their cities are finding ways to improve health and then again, also tackle the climate emergency. So to set the stage, I would like to invite Brent Locken, the WWF Global Food Lead Scientist and an Eat Lancet Commissioner, to give the keynote. There is no one better able to start this discussion and to make those connections between urban food policies and practices, healthy and sustainable diets, and the climate crisis. Brent, you are someone I respect so much. It's an honor to finally meet you in person. I can't believe it took this long. So I'm going to give it over to you. And if you'd like me to give you a leading question, I'm happy to. But I'm going to give the floor to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dani. We've been chatting online for quite some time, and we've got a lot of things planned over the next few weeks, so it's nice to finally meet. I've got a PowerPoint. If you guys could key that up, please. Today I'm going to talk about the role of healthy and sustainable diets, and I think that is probably a message that you guys have been hearing quite a bit over the last several days. But I'll dig into it a little bit and set the stage, and hopefully we can have a bit more of a discussion afterwards. Is it ready? Okay. The restorative power of healthy and sustainable diets. Next slide, please. Do you guys have a clicker that I can use, or? I'm going to be saying next slide quite a bit if I, yeah. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's just start by taking a bit of a stock take of the planet. I think sometimes we have a tough time wrapping our head around and like what's going on. And if you just have a brief skim of the headlines, you can see some of this. Climate crisis is the worst if you look at the recent droughts, the worst in the last 2,000 years. That's from March 15th, 2021. The world is at its hottest for at least the last 12,000 years, January 27th, 2021. Ice loss catching up to worst case scenario predictions. That's from January 29th, 2021. 1 million species driven to extinction, May 6, 2019. Just last week, pandemic has fueled a sharp rise in global hunger. Actually, the rise in global hunger is the worst that it's been over the last 5 years combined. We're at 811 million people go hungry. And on the flip side of it, children and teens are gaining weight at an alarming rate as we've sat inside during this pandemic, not exercised, and unfortunately ate too much junk food. So things don't look good, but it's not all that bad, and we cannot get mired down in the negativity because it can be paralyzing sometimes. And if you look at some of the recent trends, life expectancy has actually gone up. There are good things that have happened. Poverty has gone down. It's actually decreased. Child mortality has gone down, so we have made tremendous progress. However, how have we made this progress? We've done it by exploiting nature. We've done it by thinking that nature is one of those resources we can continue to do whatever we want with it. We can dump as much CO2 into the atmosphere as we want. We have these exponentially increasing curves, and you're going to see the curves. They all look the same. Energy use, exponential. Tropical forest loss, exponential. Water use, exponential. Ocean acidification, exponentially increasing. Fertilizer use, the same. And you can see at the beginning of this, the thing with exponential curves, it starts out really slowly. You don't feel the impact at the very start, but at the end it gets really, really big, really fast. What we have to start doing with this is we have to start bending the curves. We can no longer continue on this upward trajectory of exponential increases of every single thing that we're using on this planet. It's not sustainable. We're finally starting to wake up to that fact. So what does food have to do with all this? You guys know these facts. I don't need to spend a lot of time on them. 1 in 3 overweight, obese. 1 in 12 go hungry. Leading cause of death. And no country is on track to meet any of their health targets by 2025. Environmental impacts the same. Between 27 to 33% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from food. 70% of freshwater use. Main driver of deforestation and biodiversity loss. It's the number one impact of environmental change on our planet comes from the food that we eat and how it's produced. Now, when we talk about the impacts of food, we tend to clump food into this general food category. But is all food the same? And it's absolutely not. What we're finding is that certain foods have a much larger impact than others. This shows a greenhouse gas emissions impact looking at certain foods. So if you look at some of the animal source foods, they have a much larger impact than other foods. But you also have to look at things like commodities, like coffee and chocolate. Those are also things that we need to be looking at. Pretty much across the board, when you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions impact, the plant source foods have less of an impact than animal source foods. Very similar impacts when you're talking about water use. Animal source foods use more water than other things like plants. But not all plants are equal. If you look at something like sorghum, it uses a lot of water. We have to start wrapping our head around impacts. We have to be looking at individual food groups and where we should be growing individual foods and in what places. Now, if you want to graph the health impact, which is shown here on the x-axis, and the environmental impact, which is shown here on the up on the y-axis, what you'll see is that red and processed meat, those animal source foods, have the highest health and environmental impacts of other foods. Now, I don't want to debate individual foods and how they're produced and everything because there are differences between them. These are general trends that you will see up here. What this demonstrates is that at large, general trends demonstrate that animal source foods have greater health impacts, greater environmental impacts than if you're looking at plant source foods. Chicken, fish, and dairy tend to fall somewhere in the middle. Impacts is also a word that we need to unpack a little bit because when we talk about impacts of food, are all the impacts felt the same by every single country? And is every single country responsible for these impacts? And the answer, once again, is absolutely not. The impacts of food production and food consumption is mainly come from the G20 countries. And within the G20, it's only a handful of countries that have had the greatest impacts. Now, these are the food prints of the G20 countries. And you look at, even within the G20, there's huge variation. So if every single person on this planet was to eat like a person from Argentina, we would require 7.42 Earths. Somebody from Canada, 4.5. Somebody from South Africa, 2.94. But India and Indonesia, they're eating within the environmental limits of the Earth. So within the G20, there's huge variation. And there's some countries that have a much greater per capita impact than others. So as we're looking at differentiated responsibility moving forward, especially going into COP, we have to also be looking at whose responsibility is this. Now this plays out differently in different countries. We have this imbalanced consumption of food. Some countries are eating a lot, overconsumption of a lot of foods. If you look at North America, and red meat consumption at 638% above optimal intake. Eating too much of the potato, starchy vegetables, too much of the eggs, chickens, underconsumptions of all those healthy foods that you'll see. If you can find nuts and legumes on there, those small teeny wedges, good luck. Whereas in other parts of the world, it's a very different story. It's underconsumption of almost every single food. This is sub-Saharan Africa, except starchy vegetables. So the impacts, where is it felt, who eats, who has access to this food is something that we have to start thinking about moving forward. We have to start taking this balance, we have to start rebalancing it, and that's not only in individual countries, it's also in cities. Because even when you look at who has access to what food in cities, it's very different. There are some communities in cities that I would say that similar food patterns like this, it looks very similar. They're not driving their nice electric cars to farmers markets because they don't have access to it and they can't afford those sorts of foods. It's something that we have to fix. So where are we heading? Meat consumption continues to go up. Yes, in some places it is leveling out. And yes, in some places it is going down. But as a whole globally, we're adding 2 billion more people by 2050. It's going up. This is projected to double greenhouse gas emissions, and if you look at that, or if you think back to that initial curve of exponential increases, this is heading in the wrong direction. Doubling it by 2050, these are greenhouse gas emissions coming from food, if we continue on that path. This is where we have to head. We are on an absolute race to zero. We're heading into COP26 in 3 weeks. We have a ton of events planned for COP26. What we have to start wrapping our head around is we have to decarbonize every single sector by 2050. That means having emissions by 2030, having them again by 2040, and having them again by 2050. At 9 o'clock today, the production gap report is going to be launched. And what that is showing is that production emissions and current estimated national level productions of oil and gas and other things like that are double what they should be by 2030 to keep us on track to meet Paris. So we are not bending the curves, we're not on track, we're getting there, but we have a long way to go. Now, I think sometimes we can feel paralyzed with all this, like what can I do? It's a great thing about food. You may not be able to control your finance ministers, you may not be able to control some of those curves in terms of emissions or water reductions in some ways, but what you can do is you can control what you eat. And this empowers you, this gives you agency, and this is the single greatest thing that you can do as an individual to have an impact on this planet. So the power is absolutely on your plate. With that, there's a lot more I think we could unpack, but thanks everybody.
I want to thank Brent for his insights. I have a ton of questions. We will get to them after our next speaker. So it's now my pleasure to invite Bettina Bergman-Madsen, Head of Procurement at the City of Copenhagen, to share what is happening there. That is already such a sustainable city, so I'm so pleased to hear what Bettina has to say, and she's joining us online. Hi, Bettina. We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now I can. That's great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen quickly with you here.
Thank you.
To see if it's working. Is it possible for you to see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, anyway, I thought I might have some computer problems because I'm unfortunately at the hospital with my daughter. So I'll just give my speech
goodness,
and I will
yes, of
send
course.
you my presentation afterwards, and you can share it with everybody.
We'll
So
share
I'm
it,
really
thank
happy
you.
to be here. I'll be here shortly. So I will use my 7 minutes and then I'll have to go again quick. But I'm a procurement officer from the city of Copenhagen. And as you said, we are a very green city. And I fully agree, we have to act now. It can't wait until tomorrow. So as a procurement officer, I am so happy, and I want to share the news with all other procurement officers that we actually have a job where we have the possibility to do something. Most countries have said yes to the Sustainable Development Goals. Most cities have also said yes. We work with them. They have also made political commitments to many different things in each city. Some prioritize saving the groundwater, like in Copenhagen, where we are 90% organic in all our meals. We serve meals on site because we think it's important that we cook so the people who we serve the food to can smell the food and get the experience of freshly cooked meals. And we try to eat according to seasonality and diversity. And as a procurement officer, we have to work this within our procurement. So these are some of the criteria that you have to put into the procurement once you write it. Without putting them into the procurement, the people who are cooking in the kitchens, the chefs, they have no possibility to buy the right food and then to cook the delicious meals that are served in the kitchen. So I'm not the one who's cooking, and I'm not the one who's planning the menus, and those are the most important key factors to create these changes, because, as it was just said, it is what ends on the plate, but I'm the one who makes it possible that they can buy the food that are needed. So this is my role for this. In the procurement of Copenhagen, like I said, we actually have 100% organic procurement. And we did this within the budget because we actually managed to teach the kitchen staff how to cook differently, so that they now buy more grains and lentils and less meat, more fruit and vegetables in season. So in the procurement, we also have to ask for fruit and vegetables when they are in season. So some of all these things we have worked within the procurement, and we have now beginning to create this little toolbook together with the WHO so that we can share our good ideas on how to do more green procurement. We also took in account how to ask for more green packaging so that it can be reused. We are trying to lower CO2 emission by the driving of the food here, so we go by green vehicles as possible in the city. So all these things you have to take in account when you do your procurement. So it's not just a contract of how to buy food. You have to think the whole way around. We also are thinking about how to reduce food waste at the supplier side. But to do this, we need to know what are they throwing out before you can think about how to reduce it. So these are some of the factors that we work on. But one of the things that I have been asked to highlight here is actually the newest thing that we worked on. And we worked on this together with the Danish Technological Institute, University, I think, DTU it's called, and with our consultants who knows a lot about food. We used what we call a climate weight. And this is where the university has pointed out food groups that are more environmental friendly than others. And these food groups, we actually gave a higher grade so that these groups, for example, nuts and lentils, were giving the grade of 10, whereas meat and dairy products were giving the grade as 1. This was added to the total amount we buy per year, so that, for example, 10 by the total amount of hazelnuts that we buy per year, then added with the kilograms or the price per kilo, so that suddenly the weight of the hazelnuts, for example, took a greater room in the procurement than it would normally. This way, that it had more value. So by this simple mathematic tool, we gave climate-friendly food a higher rating in our procurement. So these are some of the things you actually can do really easily. And one more point was, actually, it showed that the environmental friendly food suddenly had a little bit lower price because suddenly they had a higher value because it was added by 10. So this was just an easy quick fix for some of the things and how you can use procurement as a tool to support a greener change. So I think I used my 7 minutes now. I have a lot more on the presentation, but that was 2 for now. And like I said very shortly before, we are together with the WHO trying to write this user manual on how to do green public sustainable food procurement. I'll be happy to share it once it's finished. And then we are also creating this European network for procurement officers, because it's really important that we share this knowledge, because often procurement officers are seated alone in their office and have nobody else to share it with. They're not just doing food procurement, they're doing diapers and rotary machinery and everything else. So share this knowledge on how to do sustainable green procurement on food is really important. So I think that was it for me now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bettina. And I just want to reiterate a few things. I think the power of procurement, we can't overstate that. There's so much that can be done on food procurement. And it really builds, I think, on what Brent said earlier about the power of our plate and what we can do to make things change. But city governments and national governments really need to be involved in that process so that procurement in sustainable ways can happen. And I'm also really interested in this climate weight that you mentioned, because some food groups are better than others. They're not all created equal. And if we can have a real concrete system to assess that will help procurement officers in so many different ways. And again, the sharing of that knowledge between those different officers is going to be key in different cities and different countries. So thank you for pointing all of that out. I know you're at the hospital, so good luck to you and your daughter, and good health to you. And if you can't stay for a question and answer, we totally understand.
Thank you very much, and have a great day. Thank you for having me.
So I want to thank Bettina again. Our final speaker on the food climate nexus is Mehdi Tamrant, the school health nutrition advisor to the mayor of Addis Ababa. Over the last year, the city has had a real focus on school meals during the pandemic. So Mehdi, it's great to have you here, and we're really interested in what you've been doing in Addis to increase the availability and the nutrition of school meals. I hope she's here.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm Mehdi Tamrant from the city of Addis Ababa, and I'm also working as a mayor advisor in the Nutritional Secretariat coordination. So now we are a new member of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So I want to say thank you for the chairman and also Stefania for the Pact and for welcoming us. I'm very excited to join you. So in the context of Ethiopia, or particularly in the city of Addis Ababa, food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an effective and healthy life. In Addis Ababa city, the underlying causes of food insecurity include, among others, unavailability, inaccessibility, and poor consumption of diversified, nutritious, and safe food in a sustainable manner. Lack of access to food, which is the key factor behind food insecurity, remains a central concern in the city. And in Addis, many households with good access even to sufficient food suffer from poor nutritional status because of poor dietary practices. So they often consume a monotonous and undiversified diet, and so suffer from all forms of malnutrition. Among them, most of them are children who are at school. So then, to improve the food system, one step, and also to minimize the challenge, the city administration is investing on school feeding program. The school feeding program contributes to the alleviation of short-term hunger and helps children concentrate on their studies and enable them to gain increased cognition and better educational outcomes. It also addresses micronutrient deficiencies such as vitamin A, iodine, and iron, among others, which directly or indirectly affect cognition and can result in better school performance. Hence, school feeding program is promoting with the intention of providing balanced meals for children in schools, especially for those coming from poor and food insecure households and areas, as well as those affected by natural and man-made emergency situations. So children from well-off families are also encouraged and taught to carry nutritious lunch boxes. In Addis Ababa City Administration has introduced a school feeding program in all kindergarten and primary government schools in Addis Ababa since 2019. Currently, the program has been feeding about 520,000 school children. The feeding program provides support to address food insecurity among children in Addis Ababa while improving learning and educational outcomes. The program, one of the many special interventions by the Addis Ababa City Administration, offers 2 meals for children from KG to grade 8, and also it provides school materials, including the school uniform, to students in all public schools in the city. So then the Addis Ababa school feeding program procurement modality is it's a catering system, which is hiring unemployed women, and most of them are mothers of the benefited children, in order to cook food in school, and because of that, more than 10,000 women are getting a job in school. So the mayor of the city believes that the school feeding program is a human capital investment and considered as a very useful intervention to improve students' attendance, participation, concentration, and health. It has also lifted a parent's burden as well. Thus, the city administration is working in collaboration with partners and also the community in order to get the maximum benefits out of the program. Communities are involving, like in planning, in resource mobilization and management of school feeding program. And also sectors like education, health, and agriculture, and also other relevant bureaus and development partners are also working closely with the communities and assist and encourage them to ensure a minimum level of local food production to implement a homegrown school feeding program and to ensure the sustainability and ownership of the program. In some schools, even school gardens are connected with school feeding programs for demonstration purpose and to serve as resource centers for learning more about nutrition practically. Since it's Addis, it's a city, so schools, they don't have large amount of land, so they don't produce food directly for school feeding program. But in some aspects, like vegetables, fruits, sometimes they use it for KG students, and basically it's used for demonstration purpose. So on the other hand, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and other social problems, significant number of the city residents is hit by the pandemic crisis, which affects the food system of the city. So in order to alleviate the problems, the city administration established 6 feeding centers and is providing food in daily basis for the poor residents of the city. Currently, more than 12,000 people are getting free meal every day from the centers, and also it's a great job for about 170 youth and women. The food centers are also designed as a training centers and also help to coordinate with other sectors or bureaus. Sometimes it helps to give training, and also it can be a job creation, and also a research center, which basically used to address the pressure of socioeconomic problem of vulnerable groups in Addis Ababa. The food centers can be also learning centers and minimize food wastage, since most of the food comes from leftover and save food from the hotel, supermarket, and other fresh corners. So in general, the city is really working in both aspects, and particularly the school feeding part, and also building the feeding centers. As a good lesson, for example, in school feeding part, the Addis Ababa city is the first city in Ethiopia to launch school feeding program for all KG and also graded from KG up to primary graded students. And it gives a power even for the national government of the country to prepare a policy, and it's also highly influencing other cities to think about providing or scaling up school feeding program, because now the city is benefiting a lot by having a school feeding program, and we are just getting a very positive encouragement and support from the community as well. So thank you very much, and I'm done with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Madi. That was a really informative presentation. I love that the school feeding programs have this really integrated system, providing meals and jobs and uplifting women. That's really, I think, special. And with that minimum amount of local procurement is really uplifting local farmers as well. So thank you. I want to now turn to questions. And so, Brent, I don't know if you want to go to the table so you have a microphone. Sure. Because my first question is for you, and then we can open it up to the audience. So, Brent, you and I and others have been working really hard on something that you initiated, which is the Sustainable Consumption and Diets Global Action Platform. And I'm wondering why start it now? Why start it this year? What the pandemic had to do with that? What COP26 and all of these other events that I'm sure you'll talk about that are happening over the next year? Why start it now?
So food is one of those interesting things. We all love to talk about it, but nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, it's very weird. So when you're looking at these global processes, whether you're talking about the climate conventions, the biodiversity conventions, or if you're looking at land use conventions, food is not on the table. They're talking a little bit about livestock, they're talking a little bit about production strategies in agriculture, but they're not talking about consumption-based emissions. So one of the things that we're working on is we realize that if you're only addressing one side of the equation, you won't be able to solve the problem, not even close. Because if we don't start addressing our consumption side emissions, increased consumption, even if we put in place the most innovative production practices, the most innovative food loss and waste practices, if we don't change the food that we eat and how much we're actually consuming, we will still drive land use change, we will still drive biodiversity loss, and we won't solve the problem. So we started this action platform with the sole intention of raising the profile of food and the impact of food at these major conventions, these major conferences coming up, leading up to Stockholm Plus 50 next year. So we've got a great group of stakeholders. We come together and we are planning a lot of different things leading up to Stockholm Plus 50. At COP this year, we have, I don't even know anymore how many events 14. We have planned. 14 events that we have planned over 4 days, dinners and side events. We're talking about a whole host of things, everything from livestock to agriculture to diets, with the intention of how do we influence climate negotiators so that leading up to the revision process in 2025, what can we do to get food back on the table? We would like to do the same for biodiversity cops. We have article series, podcast series. We have a lot of things planned right now with Food Tank. So if we do not start talking about this in the right places with the right people, nothing's going to happen.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. One question I have for you is we're talking about the consumption side, and one thing that I always worry about is that consumers, eaters, feel blamed for their consumption practices. How do we change the narrative about not blaming people for their health problems and everything else that comes from poor diets that are not necessarily their fault?
Yeah, that's tricky. In some cases, I think consumers have to be blamed. It sounds terrible, but in some cases, it's not their fault, right? They're in a terrible food environment, and the only thing that they have access to are foods, and the only thing they can afford is the wrong foods. So we definitely have to look at both sides of that in terms of what we can and can't change. What we can't do, though, that I think is very important, is we can't put all the onus on the consumers, which is what often happens. We tend to say, hey, change your light bulbs and do all this stuff, and if you just do this, it's going to be enough, and that's not true. Consumers have an absolute critical role to play, but we also have to change the policy. We have to push the politicians, the national level, the city level politicians, to put in the right regulations to be able to create the healthy environments where everybody has access to that. So consumers do have a role to play, but definitely not the only role.
No, and you mentioned the power of our plates and making, really important decisions about what we eat and how we eat it. But we also need to use the power of our vote to vote for city leaders and national leaders who are going to make the kinds of decisions that we want around food and agriculture.
Absolutely, and not be afraid to open that too difficult box. I think talking about food can be uncomfortable sometimes because it can be very polarizing. We were just talking about it before this. I mean, we put people into camps, right? You're either vegetarian or you're not. If you eat meat, you're bad. If you don't eat meat, it's kind of ridiculous how food has become such a polarizing thing, and we absolutely have to stop that. But don't be afraid to open that too difficult box of talking about this, the most important thing that we can talk about, and that's food. And it's the health. It's the health of us. It's the health of the planet. It's the health of every single person. So,
yeah, you're right. The urgency is too great not to talk about it. We have to talk about it at every conference, at every event. So thank you so much, Brent. I now want to turn to Mehdi, because I think what is happening with their school feeding programs in Ethiopia has a lot of lessons for other cities. So, Mehdi, I'm wondering if you can advise other cities about how they could start from scratch like you were able to. I don't know if she's coming back.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat me?
I can.
Please? Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it shows the influence of the mayors. As I told you, even before the national government started the school feeding program, the city mayor influenced highly to tackle the challenge and the problem which were faced in the schools. We observed a lot of challenges and issues in the school, and then the mayor was very influential. So we established school feeding agency, to make it more sustainable, and the government clearly allocated money. So then it really became a good lesson for other cities as well. And now the National Education Ministry in the federal level launched the policy even after we started the school feeding program. We were lead the program by strategy, but now we do have a policy. So my lesson, or the point that I want to underline, is how mayors are really influenced to implement the program, and the mayors has to give more attention and the priority for improving food system and challenges of the community as well.
Thank you so much. That makes a lot of sense, and I think is very helpful. And and advising other communities how to do this. One of the things around school feeding that I feel very encouraged about is at the UN Food System Summit, a coalition emerged around school feeding. So I think we'll only see more sharing of knowledge around school feeding programs and how they can really help communities. We're at the end of this first part of this event. I want to thank all our speakers again. Can we give them a round of applause, please?
Thank you.
So, Brent, if you want to go back to your seat, right, you can. I want to move on to the second session on healthy diets and the food environment. And Brian Cook will give a short keynote. He is a senior researcher in health behaviors in the livestock environment and people at the University of Oxford. He will share the latest findings around behavioral science around food consumption, which we hope will help decision makers make smart interventions, which could help us all make better food choices, as we were talking about before. So Brian, it's great to have you. I'll give you the floor.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So I will speak for a bit about the research we've been doing at Oxford on the ELITE project, where we're looking broadly at the health, environmental, and social implications of what we eat, and in our area specifically looking at how we can help people make healthier and more sustainable choices. So obviously, when we think about that, we often think about the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Plate, as we know, where it says that we should be eating a lot more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, a more plant-sourced protein, and minimal animal-sourced protein, as we already heard this morning, how animal-sourced protein has a much higher environmental impact compared to plant, especially ruminants, the beef and lamb and so on. But we know that, of course, our consumption is not in line with these recommendations. So we would need a doubling in global consumption of healthier foods to meet those recommendations, and more than a 50% reduction in added sugars and meat. And we know, of course, that in the wealthier countries is where we're eating a lot more meat and where that reduction, especially around red meat, really needs to happen. So given that our consumption is not where it needs to be, there are a lot of strategies that we need in order to get that in line with the recommendations. So we, of course, know because of this event, and all you working in cities, that most of the food choices are happening in cities, and it's only increasing. So what can cities practically do to promote this kind of shift in diets? And what do we know about behavior change in general? And are there some frameworks that those working in cities can use to develop some interventions that might be helpful in this regard? So when we think about behavior change in general, this is, for example, the COMBI model of behavior change out of University College London, which is a very helpful framework. When we think about behaviors, they stem from the capability to act, the opportunity to perform that behavior, and the motivation to follow through. So we can think about this in any example of any behaviors or around diet change. So when we promote people that should be eating more fruits and vegetables, well, obviously they need to have the capability to prepare those fruits and vegetables if needed. They also need to have the opportunity to access those foods, whether it be financial access or geographic access. Those foods need to be available. Then they also need to have the motivation to do that. So therefore, the food needs to be appealing. They also need to have the internal motivation to realize and interpret the information saying this is good for your health and so on. So this framework, it kind of explains all kinds of behaviors and what needs to be in place for people to perform the behavior that we'd like them to do or ourselves to do. And you go beyond that, you think about specific strategies that can influence people and their capability, opportunity, and motivation. So everything around education or restrictions on choice, coercion, training, there's a whole range of strategies that could be used to help influence these behaviors. And then when you think about policymakers and government, you think of specific policies that could enable this change. Everything, again, from guidelines, fiscal measures, providing incentives, regulation legislation, or communication and marketing campaigns. This is called the behavior change wheel. There's a lot more information online about how to use this and a step-by-step process about how to implement this practically. This gives you kind of a framework for how you might think about choosing specific strategies to help people in the cities to eat more healthy food and more sustainable food, specifically less meat. So maybe an easier way to think about this is we need to make the healthy, sustainable choice easier, kind of nudging we often talk about, and make the unhealthy and less desirable choices harder. Sometimes we talk about the opposite of nudge being sludge. So adding some kind of friction, making those less desirable choices harder to make. So you think about examples specific to cities, what they might do. I'll just talk quickly about some ideas here. So cities, of course, run a lot of cafeterias and other eating places, whether it be at publicly run sites or in schools or elsewhere. So how might they be able to change the environment in a cafeteria to help promote healthier and more sustainable choices. So, for example, one strategy is around availability. So just increasing the availability of the desired food and decreasing the availability of those undesirable foods. So this is the one that has come up in literature to be pretty promising strategy over and over again. So here's an example of a menu, for example, in a cafeteria, where perhaps you have 2 meat dishes and 1 veggie, or 1 meat, and you transition the menu to having 1 meat dish and 2 veggies. So you're shifting the ratio of what's on the menu. We did this experiment in Oxford at one of the cafeterias here and found a 20% reduction in the meat meal sales with no overall reduction in sales and no feedback from customers saying that they either noticed this or had any issues with this. So this is one strategy that's been used often to be quite effective. Another is around positioning. So changing the positioning of a desired food to increase their prominence. In the picture there you see an example of a Sainsbury's store. So we did an experiment with that UK supermarket back in 2019. And we moved their veggie sausages, veggie burgers, so the veggie alternative products, from the veggie aisle into the meat aisle in 20 stores. And then we had 88 stores that we compared the sales to. So we found in those stores where we moved the meat-free into the meat aisle, a 31% increase in sales of meat-free, whereas in the control stores, it was only a 6% increase. So this was found to be quite an effective way of increasing meat-free sales simply by moving the meat-free into the meat aisle and making it more prominent. This has been found elsewhere to work on menus. Instead of having the veggie options at the bottom of the menu or in a veggie section, place them at the top of the menu. That can help as well. Another approach here is, again, kind of this idea of sludge, adding friction to the choices that we don't want people to make, as opposed to getting rid of the choice altogether. So here's an example of a menu that we used in a study where all the options here are vegetarian, but at the bottom, you have the option to add meat if you like. So didn't restrict any choices. But in this experiment, people were much more likely to choose a vegetarian option, even though it could freely add the meat. Another one is around using creative naming to describe plant-based dishes. So here's an example of some research from the Better Buying Lab at WRI, where they did some work in cafeterias, where they had some creative names for plant-based dishes. Here's an example where instead of calling it meat-free sausage and mash, they call it the Cumberland Spice Veggie Sausage and Mash. So a much more evocative, creative naming of the plant-based dish, and found some really positive results in terms of the increase in sales. And they found, the researchers found, that you really need to focus on where the food comes from, the flavor, look, the feel, the enjoyment of the food, and avoid these descriptive things like meat-free, vegetarian, vegan, which tend not to appeal to a mass audience. So this is, again, could be another simple option to employ. And the work that we've been doing a lot at Oxford is looking at environmental impact labels. So we came up with a system to show the environmental impact of a meal based on 4 different environmental impact indicators. So we give meals a score between A and E, and also have the color coding that you see on some of these meals. And we found in our virtual supermarket tests to be quite promising. A variety of different concepts worked. And the picture that you're seeing here is from a work site run by Compass, where this summer we did a trial in 19 sites across the country. We're just looking at the data now. We'll be running some trials with them as well in different kinds of sites. And we found this to be quite a promising area as well, to help people understand the environmental impact of what they're choosing and be able to nudge their choices in that way. So just a final summary. Obviously, when we talk about these nudges, we know we can't nudge our way out of the climate crisis alone, but we also can't do it without shifting consumption. We've heard that's a really important part of it. And even though we've seen a lot of these nudges in the research we've found here can be rather small on their own, we can't underestimate this idea of each of them helping to contribute to the shift in social norms, which is going to be a critical part of being able to shift people thinking about what is a normal diet. So I'll stop there, but happy to take any questions and love to link with anyone who finds this helpful in any practical ways or others who are working in this area. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. That was so interesting. I'm jealous of your job, and I'm rarely jealous of anyone else's job. It's fascinating what you're doing, and I think all of this research is so interesting. One question I have, and we'll turn to Q&A at the end of the very end of the session, is when you talk about the shifting sort of ratio of meat on menus and putting it at the bottom. Are people noticing this in a way that it's creating awareness so that when they go home where they're not at a place that's serving a lot of healthy meals, that they can make better choices? I don't know if that question makes sense, but is the awareness sort of growing? Do they get the education that they need to make choices that are not at these sort of healthy cafes?
I don't think in that particular kind of nudge people are seeing that. That's part of the most subtle kind of strategy we can think of, where we're just shifting the menu and doing that kind of choice editing. So I don't think that's one where people are kind of consciously reflecting on the environmental impact. I think we see it a lot more when it comes to the eco labels that we have,
Sure.
where people especially can sometimes have some real head scratchers when they see a particular dish is a C instead of a D or a B, and they may not be quite aware of the impact of water or biodiversity loss on particular food. So that we find is a bit more education. Something I didn't mention is probably the biggest effect we've seen from the eco label so far is working with the actual food service companies, where we send them the scores for the meals and they say, uh-oh, this trout dish we thought was coming from a sustainable source that you've scored as a D. Maybe we need to think about having different ingredients, reducing this or that. So they themselves are changing their meals based on the eco labels before consumers even see them.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned Compass, who is doing extraordinary work on creating more healthier options for folks. So thank you so much, Brian. We'll come back to you in a little bit. We will now hear via video from Victoria Simon in Los Angeles about what the city is doing to increase consumption of healthy and sustainable food. Victoria is the Director of Operations in the Sustainability Department of the Mayor's Office. And she's going to go through their programs that are targeting underserved communities. So please cue the video.
Thank you so much for letting me join you virtually today. My name is Victoria Simon. I am the Director of Operations for LA Mayor Garcetti's Sustainability Office. Earlier this year, Los Angeles signed on to the Milan Food Policy Pact, reaffirming our commitment to ensuring a healthy and sustainable food system for all. Since this convening brings together representatives from around the world, I thought I'd provide a little bit of context about Los Angeles. The greater Los Angeles area is a critical focal point for our regional food shed. The metropolitan region has a population of about 18 million people. It's the 11th largest economy in the world. We are the largest producer of fruits and vegetables, as well as nuts, in the United States. The food system here employs 1.3 million people and accounts for 1 in every 7.5 jobs in the region. While there's great abundance in LA, it is like many other places, it is not always distributed equally. 8% of our city's population lives in extreme poverty, and that is concentrated within 4 of our 35 community planning areas in the city. That's 270,000 people that are living far below the poverty line. When it comes to food access, residents in low-income communities report difficulty in accessing healthy food and experience food insecurity at higher rates compared to higher-income neighborhoods. I think that this graphic really helps illustrate the point. As indicated here, the disparities are most evident in our communities of color, such as South Los Angeles, where there are fewer grocery stores and higher rates of obesity and nutrition-related chronic diseases. As a matter of fact, less than 10% of adults in South Los Angeles, and in some communities near the Port of Los Angeles, report eating the recommended 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. As a comparison, the number was 22% for communities on the west side of Los Angeles. This inequity has negative consequences for the health and well-being of our residents, as well as the planet. That's why food systems is an important chapter in LA's Green New Deal. LA's Green New Deal is LA's roadmap for meeting the Paris Climate Agreement and achieving carbon neutrality by at least 2050. Not only that, it focuses on securing a more sustainable, equitable, and prosperous future for all Angelenos, no matter their zip code. The specific food system targets in the Green New Deal are as such: ensure all low-income Angelenos live within half a mile of fresh food by 2035, increase the number of urban sites in LA by at least 25% by 2025 and 50% by 2035. Prepare for natural disasters by increasing the resiliency of our food systems infrastructure. Today, I'll focus on the first target, where we are looking to ensure that all low-income Angelenos live within half a mile of fresh food. The Good Food Zone policy recognizes that food is a powerful driver for community economic development. At its core, the Good Food Zone policy's goals are to increase access for healthy food in communities that have been historically underinvested in and promote economic development through food entrepreneurship. The program provides economic incentives for businesses, including restaurants and retail, to provide healthy food in specific neighborhoods that have been designated a food desert. There are technical supports for these businesses to transition their offerings to appeal to customers and public recognition as a good food zone provider. I should highlight that this program is intended to benefit current residents as well as local entrepreneurs, giving priority to business owners that have been in the community for 3 or more years. The first 2 pilot areas are being rolled out now, with a total of 5 slated by 2025. The second program I'd like to highlight is our Healthy Food Market Network. This program leverages existing community assets and actors that are already serving their community. There are over 1,300 community stores, corner stores in LA. So with the leadership of the LA Food Policy Council, we are helping build the capacity of neighborhood markets to operate as successful, healthy food retailers in underserved communities. Through this program, they receive training and technical assistance to small business owners so they can grow their business and improve their store, attract new customers, and cater to the local community, successfully vend healthy food products, and grow with their industry and build their community network. The program really speaks for itself. Over 51 store owners have completed the program. Produce revenues have increased 124%, and healthy food products increased almost $1,500 weekly. You see, 100% of store owners saw healthy food sales increase. I wanted to share just some pictures from 2 of these stores. So you can see the before on the left and the after on the right. And as illustrated here, food is really, the fresh food and healthy food, including fruits and vegetables, are really centralized in the center of the store, with additional natural light coming in, lighter colors. And here's another picture. So none of these programs would have been possible without the support and really the leadership of our local community groups, who are the champions behind much of this work. It reflects the importance of collaboration between grassroots groups and city government on the lives of our most disadvantaged communities. In closing, there's much still yet to be accomplished to ensure the health and longevity of our people, as well as our planet. But through the work each of us is doing locally and sharing globally, like we are right now, we have the opportunity to innovate and think creatively about an issue as old as time, but fundamental to our future. Thank you so much for having me here. Peace and love.
So I just want to make a few comments about the video, and one is that the building the capacity of local food markets, or what is called bodegas. I'm not sure if they're called here that here, but to become more healthy and sustainable, these corner stores have a lot of opportunity to reach people, and so it means that you don't necessarily have to go into a neighborhood and build a big grocery store. That you can transform these small entrepreneurs into something more healthy and sustainable and really beneficial to the community, and also create more jobs. Our last speaker on shifting consumption is Ruth Stossel-Weiner, who's joining us online from the city of Tel Aviv. She is the city's urban food policy coordinator. Tel Aviv has just created a new plan on where where education and promotion of healthy food has a really, really big role. So Ruth, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm Ruth Stossel-Weiner, and I'm the Urban Food Policy Coordinator in the Environment and Sustainability Department in Tel Aviv-Yafo Municipality. Our city nutrition program, Beteavon, meaning Enjoy Your Meal, was established in 2016 after the Tel Aviv municipality joined the MUFPP. Our vision is to leads this program to make healthy and sustainable food accessible for all the residents and those who visit in the city. Now I will present one of our 8 programs that are running in parallel. The differences of the the influences of the COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in many people losing their job, forced people to make more home-cooked meals. This inspired me to harness the financial motivation to encourage people to adopt new habits for sustainable and lifestyle in their house. In this win-win situation, we are promoting our professional goals, and families are saving money and gaining healthy. By making healthy homemade meals, limiting the amount of red meat, reducing food waste, and running the kitchen more efficiently. We are proud to launch an online dynamic program called Don't Put Enable Money into Waste. Our program provides tools to a better management of the kitchen, while examining the food expenses as well as helpful tips to smart and effective way of organizing the kitchen. The goals of this program are based on insights from our daily conversations with thousands of parents of young children in WhatsApp and Facebook groups. We want to encourage parents to prepare balanced and diverse meals as part of the parental compassion to bring their children's potential to its fullest. If you eat well, you are able to think better. Sorry. Now I will present main challenges I identified and the solutions we were, in our program. The first challenges focus on food purchasing. Most Israeli families shop once a week. Usually, they are buying too much food. Research shows that households throw away 23% of the fruit and vegetables they buy. So, how can we assist households to better plan their shopping? We want to educate households to create a food inventory that is available and diverse. The second challenge, how to implement nutritional diversity. Some parents mix up culinary diversity with nutritional diversity. They believe serving boiled eggs instead of an omelette is nutritional diversity, while it's just culinary diversity. Our mission is to teach them that in this case, nutritional diversity would be serving hummus instead of eggs. Third challenge, the differences between cooking meals and assembling dish. Working parents are convinced that making healthy food takes a lot of time, so they are looking for easy solutions and use ultra-processed foods which are unhealthy. How we can encourage people to cook more meals at home with quality ingredients. Our goal is to implement efficient cooking methods, such as cooking ingredients ahead of time that can be assembled into a meal. Like when they want to eat, they have just 5 minutes to combine all the ingredients together, much like in a restaurant's kitchen. Taking into account these 3 insights, we launched a pilot in the beginning of this year that included educational videos by local chefs, lectures by nutrition experts, and financial advice. The pilot participants' feedback was very positive, with a 40% decrease in food expenses among participants who finished all the course, indicating that even if they only attended 1 or few meetings, their food awareness increased and changed their consumption behavior. Recently, we expanded the course while the following editions: 1, as you can see in my slide, more content such as compost and educational supermarket course, and collaboration with the municipality program Sustainable Neighborhood to encourage residents to become leadership to sustainable and reducing food waste within their community. Some of these community leads have already started projects, such as neighborhood green grocers who sell ugly vegetables at a low price. I am excited to announce the financial launching of our program. Don't put edible money into waste, which will start this November. I want to thank you, Deputy Mayor Ladiansky, for so supporting our program, and a special thanks to the professional team in the C40 organization. Thank you all for listening, and bon appetit.
Thank you so much, Ruth. One question I have for you is similar to what I asked Meti earlier. How can other cities learn from this program?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, of course they can take this program and implement it their municipality, but they should take attention that it takes time. It's not a short process. They need to take like 5 or 6 years to analyze the change. I advise the city to start to analyze the household's habits according to the culture and the specific social characters of the city, or if they want to do it in the special neighborhood. And then they should do the gap analysis and recommend the collaboration with the local NGOs and another units in the municipality to create a few programs, because now one unit can't do this change alone. You should do it in a partner with all your partners in the municipality. And it is important not that it's not one program for all the residents, but a few tailor-made programs, as we are now do, that we would like to happy to assist any city based on our experience and help them.
Great, thank you so much, Ruth. And I think a lot of what you had to say about food waste feeds well into our next session, which is about food waste. And as we all know, food waste represents up to 50% of municipal solid waste in urban areas. And many cities are working towards reducing it by 50% before 2030 as part of achieving Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. So now our third keynote is from my very good friend, Dana Gunders, the Executive Director at ReFed, who is an amazing food waste expert. I've learned so much from her over the years. ReFed is a nonprofit based in the United States, committed to ending food loss and waste across the U.S. food system through data-driven solutions, and also really building coalitions and partnerships, which we've been hearing all this week that are really key. So in her video, Dana is going to give us some clues on what are the most impactful actions that need to be taken to reduce food waste, and also just suggest what kinds of things mayors could be doing in delivering those actions. So over to you, Dana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Gunders, the Executive Director of ReFed. We are a national nonprofit in the U.S. entirely focused on ending food loss and waste through data-driven solutions. Around the world, about 1/3 of all food produced goes to waste. That's about $1 trillion worth of food, and it represents about 8% of the entire global greenhouse gas footprint. In fact, if food loss and waste were a country, it would have a greenhouse gas footprint larger than any other country other than the US and China. In addition, the UN predicts we will need about 50% more food by 2050 than we have today. Where will that come from? Will we convert more land to agriculture from native forests and ecosystems, or will we use the food we already have? We estimate that we could close that gap by about 24% if we were to cut food loss and waste in half. And the UN, in fact, has a goal. It's called SDG 12.3 to cut food loss and waste in half by 2030. Our analysis in the US shows that about 35% of all food here in the US went unsold or uneaten in 2019, and only a very small portion of that was donated, despite the fact that the US has one of the best set of laws around donations and incentives out there. From a greenhouse gas footprint, we also found that residential household food waste and food service from large institutions and restaurants together make up the majority of greenhouse gases that are coming from the entire food system. So we took to finding solutions, and we created a blueprint for action that has 7 different action areas. You'll see that 5 of these 7 actually focus on preventing food from becoming surplus in the food in the first place. In fact, for each of these 7 areas, we have a whole set of solutions that we have tried to analyze. Some of them we've been able to model, and others we just know are good solutions that are out there. Those we've been able to model, we have put on what we call the ReFed Insights Engine. This is an interactive tool that allows you food loss and waste within the US. You can learn about solutions and even rank them by whether you care about finances or total tons or climate impact, and you can narrow them down by sector. You can also calculate your impact. So as a city, perhaps you want to know what is the greenhouse gas footprint of your food waste, or what might the change be? What might the benefit be if you were to, for instance, create a donation program where more food was donated, or a composting program where more food was collected for compost. You can go on our tool and actually calculate the greenhouse gas, water, and meal benefits of some of those decisions. There are a few other tools that I won't take the time to show you here because I know time is short, but I invite you to go play around. Now, what can mayors do to support food waste reduction? we encourage you to first start by adopting the UN SDG 12.3, the goal to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. There are cities, states, and countries around the world who have adopted this goal. If you haven't yet, please consider that. Secondly, make sure to support measurement and data collection. It's very difficult to manage this problem or even understand it without really measuring what the waste looks like in your own city. You can use policy as a lever. Some of the policies we've seen to be effective include landfill bans, where food is no longer allowed to go to the landfill, either for everyone in the city or for businesses of a certain size. Liability protections and tax incentives that encourage people and businesses to donate food. And then clear food safety guidance that makes people understand that it is okay to donate food, and really looking at whether or not there are some laws within your city that may prevent food from being donated. In addition, a focus on prevention is critical to really achieve the climate benefits we're after. Preventing food from becoming surplus is 8 times more effective than composting in terms of its greenhouse gas benefits. Things like a public education campaign can work really well. In fact, in the UK, they've seen a 31% in reduction in avoidable household food waste through their public education efforts. In addition, we've seen cities do restaurant challenges where they try to educate and drive participation of restaurants in adopting best practices, and school programs that both work in school lunch as well as just educating children about the problem of waste and overall the value of food. Lastly, there are all sorts of public-private partnerships out there that seem to be successful. Some of them are at state or country levels, but there are also local partnerships where cities and counties are providing measurement assistance. They're providing technical assistance to businesses who are wanting to reduce their own waste. They're providing grants for different technologies that can help. And they're also having discussions around local policies that can help or hinder for this problem. I know time is short today, so I encourage you all to take a look at our ReFed Insights engine at refed.com, refed.com, and congratulate you on even considering some of the policies that may really make a difference in your city. All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much to Dana. I think she provided some really good advice to mayors and cities, and the tool she mentioned is really, really useful. So I encourage you all to go to refed.com and learn more about it. We'll now hear from a city that has a big spotlight shined on it very soon, and that's Glasgow, Scotland. We'll hear from Anne Richardson, Glasgow's Deputy on Sustainability and Carbon Reduction. She is online because she has a big job ahead of her the next few weeks, getting ready for all of us who are going to embark on your city. So I'm really interested in hearing what Glasgow is doing on food waste, and more specifically how your segregated food waste initiatives are going.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and can I say that Glasgow is looking forward to seeing everybody who wants to come to our city. Glaswegians like nothing better than showing off our city and meeting new friends, so we cannot wait to see all of you, but it is indeed a very busy month for us. But I'm delighted to be here to speak in today's session. The topic of food waste is such an important one. We've heard already in terms of our carbon emissions, as well as the health and prosperity of our people. In Scotland alone, hundreds of thousands of tonnes of food are thrown away every year. And we know that with that goes the energy that went into growing, transporting, preparing and cooking this food. As a city, Glasgow is proud to have committed to reaching net zero carbon by 2030. So we must take action to manage all of our waste as efficiently as possible, while continuing to encourage our citizens and businesses to reduce this wherever they can. So, as you said, I've been asked to speak a little on our domestic food waste collections. We've had these in place since 2016. Under Scottish law, councils must treat food waste as a separate waste stream. For individual homes, we offer a mixed collection of garden waste and food waste, and that's collected from outside the house every fortnight. This is then processed into a compost that is of suitable quality for a range of uses, including horticulture, agriculture, and landscaping works. And this is a relatively straightforward service for us to provide and brings in around 19,000 tonnes of this mixed food and organic waste per year. In comparison, Glasgow generates over 260,000 tonnes of overall household waste every year. But Glasgow, like many cities, has a large proportion of our residents living in flats and in tenements. These have back courts and gardens with around 6 to 8 families sharing the outdoor space. So we initially offered each block of flats a food waste bin that they could share, and we collected this regularly. This waste stream is treated through anaerobic digestion. It provides both compost and electricity that we can feed into our national grid. At the peak of this service, we were receiving around 3.5 tonnes per year from this particular collection. Unfortunately, it had to be suspended along with some other non-essential services at the start of the pandemic. But the service was experiencing some challenges even prior to that, and this is something that we are very keen now to address. Within the blocks of flats, we've experienced frequent contamination of the food bins, and this has an impact on the service. It has significant consequences as we then need to process these collections through the general waste. When this happens, we issue letters to residents to explain the correct use of the bins. But in some cases where this situation did not resolve, we had to remove the food bins from those back courts, and we placed large bins on street for those residents who wanted to continue to recycle food. This is the hybrid model that we currently have in place, and we're constantly reviewing how effective it is going. As well as contamination, we still face a challenge as well in encouraging full participation with the service, and this can vary from block to block. We estimate that around 30% of the general household waste could be redirected through this food waste stream. And this is, of course, a significant opportunity for our city to reduce both the carbon impact and the financial burden of our waste management. In part, this may be due to food waste bins simply becoming dirty and less pleasant to use more easily than other waste streams, especially in a shared environment where there is that joint responsibility to keep them clean. But any food waste that does end up in our general waste stream can still be processed, although this comes at a greater cost to us as a council. Through our Recycling and Renewable Energy Centre, we can separate organic matter from general waste and put this through anaerobic digestion, as I'd said. So as I say, in Glasgow, we recognise the great value in managing food waste properly. And as we emerge from the pandemic, it's time to revisit this service and all of our waste streams and identify how things could continue to be improved. So at present, we're undertaking an options appraisal of what would be the optimal waste collection service structure for all of our residents. We're busy exploring best practice both in Scotland and further afield. And we've recently produced new resources for households explaining what can be recycled and how, and to try and raise awareness of the climate impacts of how we all manage our rubbish. But it's clear that a consistent and sustained communications programme is essential to the success of these services. And we also have national campaigns run by Zero Waste Scotland to encourage the reduction of waste even further. As we move ever further towards a circular economy, these messages become much more important. And we've also been working hard to integrate all aspects of our food system through work on our city's climate plan, a new resource and recycling strategy, and Glasgow's first city food plan. This piece of work was produced through a partnership between the council, the health service, and the voluntary sector. It will enable a shared understanding of what actions we must take to provide sustainable, high-quality food for all, which also supports the local economy. And this strategic alignment means we're all able to focus on the key outcomes for Glasgow and find more ways of working together. But it's also a chance for us all to engage with citizens on how climate action begins in everyone's home and that all of us can make a difference. I'm certain the challenges that we've faced will not be unfamiliar to other cities, and where solutions have been found, I hope we can learn from one another. Certainly, we've learned that effective communication with residents is crucial, as is making the service straightforward to use. Incentivising the correct behaviours can also contribute to success. Sustainable cities are built from the very foundations, how we move around and how we consume and dispose of goods. Glasgow is still on a journey towards the recycling rates that we wish to see as part of our net zero ambitions. But with the financial, social and environmental gains that we can make, it is well worth the effort that we now need to make to get us there. Thank you.
So much, Anna, and I'm glad that you're ready for us because we're coming very soon. And I'm really glad that you mentioned communication strategies around waste. And, you know, Brian was talking about behavior change before, and I'm wondering if you can talk maybe a little bit about how effective those communication strategies are for not just like segregation of food waste, but encouraging people to stop waste before it starts.
I think it's a really interesting one, and certainly across all climate action, I think we need to make the right choices the easiest and most straightforward ones, and I think we need to make them very intuitive for people. Quite often, one of the things we notice about Scotland is that different council areas will have slightly different recycling patterns, so slightly different types of plastic, for example, are collected by different councils. So again, we need to be very clear. If people move into Glasgow, they might have to use their bins differently to how they were using their bins elsewhere in Scotland, and that's a constant challenge because we've always got people coming in it and we're always needing to keep that conversation going. I think one of the things I was alluding to there was really making that connection that every time you go to your waste bin, every time you make a choice about where you put a piece of rubbish, you're actually either saving all of us as taxpayers money and you're saving carbon and helping the climate, or you're not. But we need to facilitate that. We need to take responsibility for making sure that it's very clear to people what they need to do and how to do it, and for them to be able to rely that we will then process that waste well. So again, telling people some of the story around exactly where their waste will go and how it can get turned into other products and how contamination of that waste will have a real impact on us being able to do that. I think when people understand how complex the recycling market can be and how important it is that we get it right, that helps to get the buy-in from them as well. So it's really trying to take people with us on that whole journey through, and that's something that we're working on. I don't think we've done it well enough yet. I think we have to continue to keep doing it and keep finding new ways of talking to our residents and engaging with them. But certainly we see it as absolutely crucial if we're going to achieve success here.
Yeah, and Anna, it definitely is a journey, and there's a lot to learn along the way. So thank you so much. I will now hear from our last speaker who's joining us online, and my Portuguese is very bad, so I apologize as I pronounce your name. Tatiana Padilla from the Secretariat of Food and Nutrition Security in the city of Carateva, Brazil. I'm really glad to have you here, and I'm hoping you can talk about how Carateva is managing food waste from big generators of food waste, such as markets. So great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
I'm going to share my presentation. I hope you can see it there. See. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start talking about food waste here in Curitiba. My name is Tatiana Padilla. I work for the Municipal Secretariat of Food and Nutrition Security here in Curitiba, Brazil. Just to share a little number with you, in Curitiba, we have 4 million people, counting the metropolitan region, and we have currently over 40,000 family farmers working with us in partnership. Start talking about the food bank. This project, just to give you a heads up about what I'm going to talk next, this project, it destines the organic residues generated in the street fairs, the public greengrocers, the urban farm, and the public markets of the city to the food bank. And also here, we have a project called Solidarity Table. In Portuguese, it's called Mesa Solidária, where we serve meals for free from Monday to Monday. And we have 48 institutions working in partnership with us. So they go to these spaces like the public greengrocers or the street fairs and the public markets, and they get the food, the surplus, the donation, because when the street fair is over, what was happening? There was a lot of food going as garbage. And now we have this project that we started working this year, where the institutions, they go to the street fairs when it's over and they collect this food. Here we have some pictures of the street fairs where there is the permissioners, they are donating the food. Also in the public greengrocer, the surplus of the production. And at the urban farm, since we are planting there and harvesting, the institutions, they can go there, they can get the food and they can plant it again later. So there is there are always this cycle of the food there. And here are some pictures of the institutions going there and getting the food. So they get the food from the food bank or directly from the urban farm. The volunteers, they cook the food and they serve at the project solidarity table for the people who live in vulnerability, as the homeless people who are unemployed. This project, it began a little before the pandemic started. Here in Brazil, the pandemic started last March 2020, and the project was launched in December 2019. So it was very helpful for the people because people lost their jobs. It's a very complicated time for everybody, and the project's really helping. And here at the picture, we have people getting food at the urban farm, and then the volunteers, they cook the food. It's transformed into like a salad or something, and then they serve it at the solidarity table for the vulnerable people. Also, at the urban farm, we have a space where we call the kitchen school, and we have qualification course for the population and also for the kids at school. Because of the pandemic, we are receiving a reduced number of people, but next year, hopefully we can get a lot more people to learn about the full use of food that has everything to do with the food waste. So when you get your vegetables from the market or the greengrocer, you can use it, you can have the full use of it. So we are teaching people how to do that. Now talking about composting here in Curitiba. We have at the urban farm, we have a partnership with a startup called Ambiente Livre, and we recently started the project called Compostroca. How does this work? The purpose of the project is to develop vermicomposting of organic waste delivered by the families who live in the community and to be transformed into fertilizer for the community's urban gardens. So we have these urban gardens here in Curitiba. We have now over 100 urban gardens, and we are starting this project with 19 families who live around the urban farm, and they bring their organic waste, and the startup is working there in the composting, turning it into fertilizer to be later used in the urban gardens of the community. It's a really great project. It's working really well. It's a pilot that we are doing here. It's a very recent project, and we are very happy with it. And just to give you some numbers, since we started the project with the food waste in the street fairs and the public greengrocers, we have received over 130 tons of food that would be in the garbage, and now we are serving it to the people because it's not garbage, it's a food we can still use. And because we have so many people working with us, we are trying to get a partnership with the Federal University here in Curitiba to get a biodigester also for the urban farm, so we can do an even much better work with composting here at the city. So my presentation is over, but because we have a limited time, because I still have a video I would like you to see. So if you can play the video, please.
Em Curitiba, o desperdício não tem vez. Se não vende na feira, vira refeição com o banco de alimentos. Na Fazenda Urbana, ensinamos a escolher, preparar e aproveitar ao máximo cada nutriente. Nas hortas urbanas, mais que apenas plantar, uma relação de respeito com o que vem da terra. Com nossos cursos, talos, folhas e sementes viram comida na mesa. E os alimentos que não servem mais, nem esses são descartados. Viram adubos nas nossas composteiras. Aqui, respeitamos o que vem da terra. Curitiba, a cidade da alimentação saudável e do desenvolvimento sustentável.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for this opportunity. I hope it's a very short time, but I hope I could pass you some information. And if you would like any other information, you can email me or ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that was a beautiful way to end this session. I'm sorry that we've run out of time, but I really like what you said about the full use of food and, you know, using peels and other so-called scraps from vegetables so that they don't end up in the bin. This has been such an informative conversation. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank all of our speakers. I know Brent will be here the next day or so you can find him in person, and you can email all the speakers online or contact me at Danielle@foodtank.com, and I will send your questions to them. Thanks to all of you very much. Let's give a round of applause.